Hi everyone, welcome to our office. So we're very excited today because we're gonna have two panels. The first panel is about managing ETH staking infrastructure at scale. So with Ernest from our team, Kiln, moderating, then Colin from Obol Network, Seb from Kiln, Elias, very good friend of mine, from Rated Network, and Alan from ssv. And the second panel, so I think there will be a small break between the two panels, but second panel is all about the merge with Georgios, Paradigm, Stefan, Flashbots, Vasily from Lido, Justin Drake, I've seen him from the Ethereum Foundation, and Nico from Alluvial. So without further ado, let's go for the panel. Ernest?
Thank you, sir. Hi, everyone. Hey, hey, hey. Always wanted to do that. This was my chance. So just to recap, so we have Colin, who's CEO and founder of Obol Network, building distributed validator technology, previously leading product strategy at Consensus. Next to him is Sébastien Ranou from the Kiln team, leading our infrastructure on Ethereum. We have Elias Simos next to him, who's co-founder and CEO at Rated Network, building reputation for machines, and he'll tell you more about what that means. I should probably sit down. And finally, we have Alan Murrock, who's project lead at ssv.network and CEO at Block Staking. So thank you all for coming. It's great to have you all. To kick things off, I wanted to start with Sebastian and ask you a bit about if you can talk through what it's like to run Ethereum infrastructure, staking infrastructure at scale today, and then we use that as a jumping off point to talk about some of the projects we have on the panel today.
Sure. So basically, when it comes to like running validators at scale, you can see it as like three different layers. Like there is like the validator layer, where you have like validators who have to attest send attestations every 6 minutes. Then you have like the consensus layer, which is usually represented by beacons, and so the validators are connected to those beacons. So the beacon is like responsible of like the beacon chain, so making sure that the rules of the protocol are followed and that the state of the network is well preserved. And then there is the last part, which is the execution layer, where blocks are being built and transactions are executed. And so yeah, like you have like this architecture that can come in different flavors with like all of those components. And then you have basically two risks to make sure you handle well. One is like downtime risk. So like if a validator goes down, you are going to lose attestations on the network and get small penalties with time. And the second one is like slashing, and like to get slashed because basically it's a bit more difficult, hopefully. So it usually happens when operators make mistakes, like when they run two validators at the same time or this kind of stuff. So there is some sort of tension between the two risks because if you try to target for 100% reliability and like zero downtime, you're going to like put probably like fallbacks, this kind of stuff. So you are going to increase the risk of being slashed because you will have keys in different places and this kind of stuff. Yeah, so yeah, that's
Maybe
basically
we can jump off to Elias. So Elias, can you talk us through how your project helps monitor the performance of validators and what you think is needed in the staking industry?
Sure. So maybe it's worth talking a little bit as to kind of like why, right? And what's the motivation behind kind of like doing what we're doing and what we've built so far and what we hope we will build, which is I used to work at a company called Bison Trails that was later acquired by Coinbase, and then we basically operated in this infrastructure space. We built a very large platform for operating validators, well, one of the biggest in Ethereum, but also other networks. The problem that I kept kind of stumbling along there is that I couldn't tell how well we were performing compared to the rest of the network. Like, where do we sit? What's our context? And then there's a lot of interesting things that you can learn from this. And I kept stumbling across the same problem over and over again. And the other, a little bit more insidious thing was that there was almost unbounded subjectivity in how people measured things like performance, right? So you would ask N operators and you'd probably get like N different answers about, hey, we're measuring rewards, or hey, we're measuring uptime. And in fact, the answer is actually not probably any of the two. And it's a combination of things. And so once you kind of like start standardizing and providing like a level of transparency and easy access to data and great context around all of that stuff, you can come up with great insights that help everybody sort of rise to the top, right? And so, funny, Seb was talking about slashing before, and we had a conversation yesterday about how we've created this thing called the effectiveness rating, which is basically kind of taking away kind of the randomness from the rewards print, which you could use to kind of like track how a validator is performing. And it's kind of focusing on the signal only according to how you perform your consensus functions as a validator. And it's a toy sort of research blog that we haven't really published yet, but we found that the few validators that have been slashed on the Beacon chain, which is about 200 right now, were exhibiting like significantly lower median in their lifetime of the effectiveness rating. And the week before they got slashed, they all started actually deteriorating. So, and they started deteriorating not in an absolute sense, but in a relative sense to the network median, right? So the negative spread started increasing. So we think that there's a lot more to uncover there, and but it's already like super interesting.
So basically, kind of suggests that operators are like, I don't know, seeing something going bad on the infrastructure and trying to respond to it, and maybe like moving keys left and right, and then you get slashed because you missed something, or
it's possible. It's possible, and the truth of the matter is that we won't like really know until we have like this kind of like data layer and this context to actually be able to align with one another, especially in a globally distributed system. I think it's quite important.
Very cool. So let's bring in Colin and Alan. So we have the two leading projects doing distributed validator technology, right? So today in the setup that Sebastian described, there is the validators hold the validator key, and that introduces some risks. So you guys are working on new infrastructure, new paradigm for this. So maybe we could start with you, Colin, and then go to Alan. If you could talk a bit through the problems you guys are solving and sort of where you are on that journey.
So a quick intro to DVT with an analogy that's super high level for everyone. You can think of it like an airplane. So if you're flying in an airplane and one of your engines like stops working, the airplane doesn't crash. Today, that's like what we need to migrate validators towards. Today, when you're running a validator, the only way to back yourself up is through a thing called active-passive redundancy, which means you put your key in two places at the same time. One is online, one is offline. If both of those things come online at the same time, well, you get slashed, right? So when running infrastructure at scale, having automated backups is like essentially breaking the rule. So what we want to migrate DVT to and like have it become is similar to like how airplanes are constructed today, but for a validator node.
Awesome. And Alan, maybe you could take us through your view on the problem and also a bit about where your project is at.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different problems we're all facing, and in general, DVT SSV tries to solve. So we talked about redundancy, backup, and slashing. Those are kind of the low-hanging fruit. That's fine. But we also need to talk about the greater systemic risk on Ethereum moving towards what it seems to be a very centralized market. Maybe you guys can someday have the statistics, but kind of subjectively, I think that probably 10 infrastructure operators today run probably 80 to 90% of the entire stake. So the systemic risk on Ethereum is pretty large. If one of them fails, it's very significant. And so I think that moving towards something like SSV DVT is the idea that you eliminate a single point of failure. Other than the low-hanging fruit like DevOps things, how do you make your infrastructure better? How do you make the entire thing better? So that's one thing. The second thing that is very much complementary is how do you make infrastructure reusable? Because if it's very hard to create infrastructure, it doesn't matter if you have 10 or 12 operators or staking infrastructure. You need 100, you need 200, you need 300. And so in order to have a lot of those operators and infrastructure providers online, you have to have it very easy to and very usable to create infrastructure and use that infrastructure in order to, again, reduce the systemic risk on Ethereum in general. Yeah.
Makes sense. So our overall theme here is the merge, right? The merge is coming. We have a very large font saying that. I think everyone's very pumped about that. So maybe we can transition to talking a bit about how the merge is affecting your project, how you're getting ready for it, what are the big changes that are coming. Maybe Seb, we could kick off with you. Like, how is Kiln? I know this because I work at Kiln. How is Kiln preparing for the merge?
So yeah, for the merge, we have been part of like all testnet merges so far. We are also part of the Sepolia testnet, which started a few weeks ago. But yeah, I think the main change for the infrastructure is kind of like a cost change, because like so basically pre-merge, you can have like the beacon layer just be connected to one or two nodes from the execution layer, because they only need to get the information about the stakes that are being made on Ethereum 1 to be able to import them into the consensus layer. But post-merge, there will be like a very tight relationship between the execution layer and the consensus layer, because, well, all blocks are going to be built by, by the consensus layer. And so what this means concretely is like the number of nodes you will need to run, like execution nodes, is going to basically almost double the cost of infrastructure. And so, yeah, there is kind of like optimizations and like, yeah, choices to remake, to adapt to the merge. Yeah.
Nice. And on a DVT side, can you talk a bit about how you guys are preparing? Maybe Alan, we could start with you this time.
So I think the foundation was very smart in that the merge itself, the impact it has on the end user is relatively small for the changes behind the scenes. I think the more interesting things happen when you're talking about the actual applications doing staking. So how do you distribute rewards? How do you handle MEV and all of those types of things? That has a bigger impact actually on something like DVT, because it adds a bunch of different conditions and rules operators and nodes need to actually take into consideration. I think the second thing, which is a bit longer term, is the merge will bump the rewards significantly. And that will mean more validators. And so everything down the pipeline means that it needs to handle scale in a different way, especially if the future is, hopefully a significant part of the staking going through something like ssv or DVT. Then you need to handle scale. And so that, I think those are the big kind of things that impact us.
Yeah, and Colin, and also maybe if you could touch on MEV and how that might interface with the setups of DVT.
For us, like in my opinion, DVT it's still in its like early days. There's only 2 projects working on it. If you look at like what happened to rollups, now there's 10s plus projects working on it. So ultimately, I think like the merge will help people be interested in the technology more, and it also comes down to it being tested. So the technology, in my opinion, needs to be tested at scale in like a recreate a mainnet-like situation and then attack net style environment, which we haven't like seen yet, and something as Obol the project we're working towards. Stealing people's time for testing is very interesting because most people are focused today on 2 things. One is MEV boost for right reason, and including that like into their stacks, into their production environments, and testing that pre-merge. For us as a project, we've chosen to be a post-merge technology for that reason, including like this another like middleware component inside of this technology stack. From our experience, is a bit too much for everyone. So for us, like now that the merge is here, that's great for us. We rolled out public testnet on Monday of this week for people to start onboarding now that the merge is getting closer. And on the talent front, we will be hiring more aggressively now, the talent that helped bring the merge to be. So for us, the merge has kind of held us back, honestly, from what we want to do, but for good reason, because these things need to kind of come in phases. So they've done a lot of great testing pre-merge. We've done mostly just DevNets pre-merge, and then post-merge is when we'll actually test the lights out of this thing. and see like what type of benefits does it actually draw. Like DVT and correlated slashing or surround voting is like quite interesting. The technology has been designed to alleviate or prevent that, but if it's being used at mass scale, like one of the things we don't know with DVT yet is like what are the centralization concerns of DVT, right? We're seeing like
introducing a new middleware component.
Correct. Like not only what are the economics of middleware, but like what are the centralization risks of middleware and like how much state can sit on a certain middleware. But again, we need to get through the MEV topic, we need to get through the merge topic, and then we'll like bolt on DVT inside of that, and then we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. So September 20th, we can start testing.
I hope it goes down at ETH Berlin. I'm really pushing for the merge having an ETH Berlin. I think it would be like historic and epic. And we'll do some testing pre that. We'll activate most of our validators the first week of August, but we won't pull them out of the network until after the merge.
Cool, makes sense. And Elias, on your side, for Rated, how is the merge affecting your product strategy?
Our goal here is to primarily help spur this conversation forward and give better and quicker feedback to DVT, to pools, to users, to infrastructure providers. So with the execution layer sort of merging with the consensus layer, we already have a pretty good context on what's happening in the consensus layer, and both in the way that we're expressing it and that we're ingesting it. Our big goal is to actually contextualize the execution layer stuff really well. So starting from transaction fees, going into MEV, figuring out what's the baseline MEV in blocks, and then what could be the maximum potentially down the line, also classifying it. So our explicit goal is to be ready to do like a very good baseline of all of those things. And in scope of that as well, we're working on developing support for Prater. Our friends from the ssv DAO have supported us with a grant to do that, which is pretty awesome. And all these things are pretty synergistic, and I hope that we indeed actually stand up to the occasion and offer value to all the great folks around us.
I think that one of the things that I'm seeing emerging is the ability to kind of not divide and conquer, but really kind of adds kind of metadata on top of the network and understand what's happening underneath, which operator works on what, how they operate, like simple, really simple stuff. What is the latency on a certain operator? Like those things are crucial if we're talking about inclusion distances in attestations or catching up MEV. This is all has to do with latency. And we just don't have that data anymore. One of the things that if you take DVT and make it a network out of it, you can sniff out the communication, and you can see exactly what everyone is doing. And so I think that this will also kind of separate between operators that want to remain private, which in some applications it's okay. But again, if we're talking about Ethereum, systemic risk on Ethereum, and in general, a community-driven project like Ethereum, that cannot be the majority of operators. We need to understand what's happening underneath. We need to understand who is working well, what is the level of centralization on top of different operators. That can change dramatically how people choose operators. Today, you're choosing them basically on how expensive they are. But if you know one operator is holding 30%, 40% of the entire network, maybe that will change the way you think. And I think that it also influences, the application on top. And so having that metadata be readily available, it's absolutely crucial.
Very cool. Last question from me, and then you guys should think of questions. We have 5 minutes for questions from the audience after this. So what's your, if we're in the final stretch of the merge, what's your call to action for builders and for the community to get ready? Or I guess, you can turn this onto your specific projects. What is your general call to action to the community?
I would say ignore Obol and just upgrade your nodes. That's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, I would say the same, and double check your configuration of, we had some misses during the Sepolia merge. So very simple config changes. Just look at the changelog of your validators and yeah.
Be alert. I suppose. Yeah.
Just generally alerts.
Yeah. We've seen like, I'm not super intimately aware into kind of like the nooks and crannies like Seb is, but I remember it was last year when Kusama was upgrading and it was bringing on parachain. So like a different scale, different scope, but like equally sort of in that specific context important upgrade. And it was messy. It was 6 weeks of upgrades, downgrades on Fridays, on Sundays, because it's distributed networks and they don't really work on a 9 to 5 schedule. But there's real people behind the machines, right, and operating those. So just I guess be alert and courageous and excited. So yeah, that's my call to action.
I think, look, anyone who's been in the industry for a while, I've been since 2012, so this is the biggest event in crypto you'll ever see. There is not going to be, unless it's going catastrophically wrong. So in that case, everything I say is not relevant. But if it does go well, this is the only, in my opinion, the only time in our lifetime that a big chain will basically change its entire infrastructure. It's not going to happen anymore. It's going to be too big. Nobody will do that in the future. It's just going to be too risky. And so you wanna say I've been there, right? Unless it fails, and then you want to say I wasn't there. I had no part in that.
Fair play. Okay. So now we have time for questions. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yeah. Do you want to shout it out? Does that work?
Yeah, sure. 30, 60, or 30, 90, and 180 days. 30, 90, and 180 days post-merge. What is the what are your sort of expectations about the networks, the like percentage of the network that's staked, and what are the constraints in either direction? So like one constraint to the downside could be the the validator queue or something like that, or there might be factors to the upside as well. Like, so give your sort of projection and then also share what factors are leading you in that direction.
Can I start? All right,
yeah, go for it.
I'll start. So I believe there's only about like 9 or 10% of the Ether in circulation that can be onboarded onto the Beacon chain in any given year. So maximum, the like top line scenario is the 5%, right, in the 180 days. And to answer kind of like your other checkpoints down from that, I expect more demand for staking than we've seen. So kind of the activation queue just growing longer and longer and longer. It will obviously be mediated by macro and like how people feel about the market and so on, but like there's a very significant risk factor that is just being removed, right? And we're like one big benchmark closer to actually withdrawals being enabled, right? So with all that risk kind of removed from the equation, then I think it's very likely that you'll see kind of demand increase. And that's like in my mind, it's always been like a really interesting opportunity for liquid staking pools, right? Because getting the actual derivative of the pool is almost like renting space on the Beacon chain. And so to me, it will be really interesting to see how that market dynamic actually evolves.
Anyone else want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great PR moment for everything that's been done in the past 2 years. I can tell you that when the Beacon chain was first launched, a lot of the people didn't notice like until a week or two later, which was, it is what it is. I think that the merge is, a lot of people will ask why weren't withdrawals part of the merge, for sure. But 180 days after the merge, I'm hoping to hit withdrawals, or at least very near withdrawals. And I think that will complete a major milestone for everyone. You'll be able to stake, you'll be able to validate transactions, you'll be able to get out. And that's like a really big thing. I think we'll see probably less stake going in if withdrawals are enabled, because I think you'll see a lot of stake going out and in. But other than this, I think this is a really good PR moment for Ethereum as a whole. And the sad part is, I don't know if there's a Bitcoin maximalist here, but I think that post-merge, Bitcoin is going to look very old. And that's, depends on where you're at and how much Bitcoin you're holding. That's either sad or happy, but I think that's going to mark a very distinct line in the sand where things are headed.
Thanks. That was a great question. Any other question? Oh, you wanted to add something. Sorry.
So with the entry delay, I think that's the biggest thing that we'll see, and the secondary thing that we'll see is like derivative assets increase in price. Most of them have been trading at a discount for a variety of like different fungibility properties, but really like from a long-term perspective, like they will trade at a premium most likely because there will always be an entry delay. On the sidelines, there's loads of ETH waiting to be staked, tons of it. Like most of the biggest piles of ETH have only staked a portion of theirs. And as a result of that, those two things I think will happen the most. I'm with Elon on the fact that withdrawals are more important and will bring like a catastrophic change to the entire product landscape. 180 days, fingers crossed. I mean, some of it's still being spec'd. Some of it has being started, but like withdrawals, I don't think will really get addressed from a mindshare perspective at the code layer and speccing layer until we actually merge. But when withdrawals do take place, it's the #1 opportunity for protocols to get vampire attacked. It's the #1 opportunity for people to like short derivative assets or do different types of things in the market. So there'll be like a variety of different activities that take place. Post withdrawals for us as a project is like where we think the most exciting action is happening, because a lot of people today are building new products and the best chance of them coming in and stepping into an existing mature market that's been around for almost 2 years is upon withdrawals. So they have a chance to steal market share for the very first time. So there'll be loads of stealth projects. I actually see vampire projects forming. Like there'll be a lot of cool things that take place post withdrawals.
Awesome. Anyone have another question? Okay, then maybe we can wrap it up here, open the windows a bit, take 5 minutes, and then we have our other panel kicking off soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
just speak very close to the mic, otherwise they can't hear you. Like this. We do small figurines after the. Wow. Very excited about this. Today we have an amazing panel about the merge, everything about the merge. So starting with Georgios, who is CTO at Paradigm. Nicholas was tech lead at Alluvial. Justin was a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation. Vasily, co-founder and tech lead at Lido. And Stefan was working with Flashbots. So yeah, I'm very excited to start maybe with Justin. Justin, can you remind us a little bit that what is the merge? What's everything about the merge? What's the merge, Justin?
Right. So the merge is an upgrade to the consensus engine. We're going from a proof of work engine to proof of stake engine. And the analogy that I have is actually similar to a physical car engine. So we're going, kind of think of it as going from a gasoline engine to an electric car engine. And we're kind of doing this upgrade while the car is running. So the first step was kind of, we were driving our car and then we just installed an electric engine, but we didn't connect it to the wheels. It was just for the purposes of testing it and oiling it and make sure it works well. And now we're at a point where we have a lot of confidence that the electric engine is working properly. So we're going to turn off the gasoline engine and connect the wheels to the electric engine.
Wow, I love this analogy. Do you like it as well? Let's go electric. Yeah, I mean, Georgios, I also wanted to have your view on what's going to be the main improvements from proof of work to proof of stake chains. That's one. And second, do you still see some downside to moving to proof of stake?
Yeah, maybe the most obvious one is that you go from an algorithm that requires a lot of energy to an algorithm that does not require a lot of energy. Good for the environment, blah, 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 you know it. Then the other thing that you get is predictable block times. So instead of having a random distribution of block times, it is now constant, which makes some application layer things easier. Then I think these are the two main things on my mind for positives. And for downsides, I think what you get is that because you get predictable block times, you also have predictable leaders. So right now, when you mine, you don't know who the next miner is going to be. Whereas after that, the validator is always going to be known. And so this opens up to attack vectors, which you can DOS a validator to do bad things. And there are mitigations to that that Justin has some input on, maybe. And the third downside, in my mind, is that in proof of work, you can always mint coins permissionlessly. Whereas in proof of stake, it's a bit, how do I say, cyclical, that you cannot inject an external resource into the system to mint coins. And so, if nobody is going to sell you coins, which might happen if you are not KYC'd, if you're in an oppressed regime and whatnot, then maybe you're not able to have coins. So there's this trade-off. And the fourth one is weak subjectivity, that you start checkpointing and trimming old history, but that's fine.
Right. Justin, what's your take on that?
I think that there's actually more advantages. So one big advantage is the reduction in issuance, right? So roughly a 10x reduction in issuance, which will lead to, you know, the issuance being lower than the burn and the supply going down, the ultrasound money, blah, blah, blah. Another big advantage is security. So not only is the economic security going to go up, so basically the amount of dollars that you need to naively perform a 51% on the system. Right now, it's hard to quantify because it's basically the amount of money that you need to go buy enough GPUs and set them up to go perform an attack. But it's, let's say, on the order of $5 billion. This is going to grow to $20 billion after the merge because we have $20 billion of ETH, which is staked right now. And then another really big advantage from a security standpoint is that we can penalize the consensus participants. And so that's a mechanism to heal the network if it's being attacked. So one kind of attack that proof-of-work systems can't recover from gracefully is, for example, just have a 51% attack where you just constantly produce empty blocks. What we can do in the context of proof of stake is we can identify, okay, who's producing this, who's running this attack, identify them and slash their stake, and in the process make ETH a little scarcer.
Got it. So very optimistic about the merge.
Yes.
And about proof of stake. Do you want to say
Just
anything?
to play devil's advocate, burning people's money might not be socially acceptable.
Right, but the fact that it exists is already a deterrent, even if it's never actually used.
Yeah, I mean, another point is that if you look at Sepolia, we've seen some drop into the validation power. So how do you think the merge is going to happen on mainnet? Maybe starting with Georgios? Successful. Okay. Any comments? Successfully smooth or?
There's this, I think, open question right now whether they're going to do, and I don't know, maybe Justin knows better on what's going to happen, but there's the choice. You need to release both a consensus client update and an execution client update where they kind of agree on a certain block where the merge will happen or a certain difficulty target where the merge will happen. And there's the question of, do we cut releases for both at the same time and do we send them to validators at the same time? Or do we do one then the other? Or do we do the one then the other with a block, what do you call it, the override, I think, the total difficulty override. But then if you add the block difficulty override, the issues that happened on, I forget, was it Sepolia or the previous testnet, where because there was a TTD misconfiguration, something didn't happen properly and the merge had to be like replayed. So I think there's this open question on how, or rather there's a decision to be made on which of the three rollout paths will happen, and depending on which happens, a whole set of risks opens up. So I think it's important to commit to which of the three and make sure it gets done right.
Got Nicholas, what's your take on is the merge going to happen successfully or not?
So I think what happened with Sepolia is a bit particular to Sepolia and testnet because the hash rate is low. And so there was this opportunity for miners to basically interfere with the Sepolia merge. So to protect from that, node operators had to like do a change of configuration like a bit manually during the merge. I mean, during the transition, and this is something that we will not have on mainnet. So I expect not to have it on mainnet, hopefully. Like, but so the difference there is like, so the fact that the hash rate is high on mainnet will make the transition maybe smoother. So we do not, node operators will not have to change this configuration manually during the transition. And then I think, and basically Sepolia recovered very quickly right after. I mean, there was a miss, validation power dropped a bit, and then node operators fixed their configurations, and the validation power came back up. So, like, it's a proof that actually the chain can also like support this type of event where we have a drop and then the chain can come back up. So I think it's actually a good sign. And and it's also why we are doing all those testnet merges before the mainnet one, is like, so we can learn this type of things. And I think the best learning here is like, and it was said during the previous panel, but it's just that configuring nodes is something that needs to be done carefully. And I think the core dev teams are doing an amazing job at communicating what to do, etc. But like, we should always like more documentation, more communication, so node operators and self-stakers get properly ready for the merge to come. So, yeah. Maybe Justin, you want to add something?
No, I think things will go smoothly. As you said, like the detail around the TDD, that's something that we won't have an issue with on mainnet. The good news is that we have lots of client diversity, at least at the consensus layer. And this is where all, or most of the complexity comes in, most of the risk comes in, and no single client has more than 40% of the network. So that's good news. I guess there is a small possibility that the dominant execution client GEF has a bug, but really the EVM is largely untouched, and so we can really look at the diff at the consensus layer. In the consensus logic within the execution client, and make sure that there's no bugs there. And even if some of the clients go down, it doesn't really matter. Like, okay, maybe finality will be impacted, but we don't even have finality on proof of work. Maybe some blocks will be empty, but that's something that will be fixed, days after the merge if we do see issues at the merge.
Okay, thank you very much, Vasily. Do you have any view on that?
Yeah, I think that like the merge had been very adequately tested. There had been a lot of test nets going on and on for like almost a year, I think, at this point. It's a very scary thing to do, like replace an engine in like, I don't think it's a car, I think it's a flying airliner or something that based on like size and potential to crash, right? So yeah, so but it's been very adequately tested. On the notice of Sepolia having problems on upgrade, I think like on mainnet it will be much more pronounced because like experience gained in Sepolia and then in Goli will make it much smoother. Like folks didn't understand how to do it well, and there were like hiccups. There won't be hiccups, I hope. So, but unlike almost any other proof of stake blockchain in existence, Ethereum has a large number of hobbyists validators, and some of them won't be updated in time. That's also almost inevitable. So we'll have some empty blocks. We'll have some validators losing money on like not being upgraded in time. It's not a problem for the network, but like would be a problem for hobbyist validators.
Thank you. And Stefan, do you, after the car, the plane, train analogy, or?
Okay, what's my perspective on the merge? So at Flashbots, we have sort of an interesting view of the network, right? We came in beginning of 2020 and like released a fork of Geth, and then within like a couple months, like 80% of the miners were running our fork of Geth and running our client on the network. So we kind of did like a takeover of the client there. And then I think for like a while we were running like relationship management between like the EF and miners. When like the EF would release a new fork, then we would like go around to all the miners and be like, hey, have you guys upgraded yet? So I'm encouraged by the fact that we're not doing this for node operators. Like node operators are all like super engaged and talking with the EF people in ways that like miners never have been. You can maybe make some claim around decentralization with this and like likelihood of collusion, but it's neither here or there. It does make me optimistic from like the perspective of a smooth transition.
Yeah, I agree. We've been talking to Justin for months now. Yeah, so I want to change topic and mention kind of the debates that was forefront about the dominance of staking pools. And I'm very happy with Vasily this year. Hope we'll have Vasily next year. And And obviously, we've been supporting the Lido project. We think it's an amazing project. I would love to have your view, Vasily, about how do you see Lido as being told is essentially maybe centralizing maybe too much of the validation power.
So we did actually, I think, very good write-ups on like ups and downs of this. The gist is like, in the simplest form, like Lido is getting user ether and distributed between node operators that actually run the validators. The potential for actual misbehaving is on validation level. Like staking centralization is dangerous because it can lead to like regulatory capture, the like the cartelization, the like all sorts of bad things, like bringing network down, economic attacks, etc. on staking layer. Lido itself doesn't run nodes, doesn't run validators. It can't harm the validation layer of the network. What it has potential to do is to select a validator set that is not great for the network. It is mitigated at this point in time by the fact that like there is no way to undo the selection we have, and so you can be reasonably sure that selection we have right now is going to last for until withdrawals are in, and for quite some time after, because that's a lot of ether. The withdrawal queue is big, so like there is no technical possibility to change our selection of operators for Lido at this point in time. When there will be a possibility, it's going to be really slow. So like there is no way for a sudden attack. The telegraphed attack can be mitigated by social layer, which is like not great but possible. And then game here is basically for Lido to not have enough control over changing the rules for selecting validator set, so that it can't try, like it can't be able to select the bad validator set if it wanted to, basically. So sufficiently limited, sufficiently neutralized governance layer over liquid staking pool does not seem very like dangerous to me, actually. Elon on the previous panel said that like he thinks that like 10 operators run 90% of stake on Ethereum. That can't be possible, because if you look at Lido, you can look at like at 30 now operators, and that run in different proportions, but like no more than 2% per operator the staking, and some of them run stake outside Lido in significant amounts, some of them don't. Most of them don't. Like it can't be possible, right? It's not the figure that can be possible. It's still bad, but not that bad, right? So I think it's healthy for the network, actually, that it's judo throw for staking. We take the basic desire of people to have a liquid derivative, and that makes a lot of sense, and use it to make a good validator set for the network. It's that.
Maybe to regurgitate, if you believe that the current Lido validator set is okay, it's going to remain okay for a year plus. So this kind of addresses the short-term concern. The governance layer, there's a proposal that was discussed a few weeks ago about even if LDO is captured, you can use stETH as a veto to a bad proposal. So this creates some opt-in for stETH holders who are indirectly ETH holders and are aligned with the network's health. And the other thing is exactly what Vasily said, 2% per validator. There is no way for Lido to tell them, do this, or we'll kick you out of the registry, because it will take a lot of time to kick them out of the registry, and the governance proposal, the veto thing can also be used there. So a lot of the concerns, I feel, have missed a lot of the nuances and are kind of, intentionally political and a bit, what's the word, like too emotional, let's say, and not technical enough. So, yeah.
Thank you. Justin, did you have another view on that, or?
Yeah, I guess my perspective is that Lido is actually more of a threat to the perceived security of Ethereum rather than the actual security of Ethereum. And the perceived security of Ethereum is extremely important because of things like monetary premium. Like we need ETH to be valuable in order for it to be very difficult to attack Ethereum because of proof of stake. And if people believe that Ethereum has been co-opted in some way, even though it may not have been in practice, then that's bad. I guess the reason why I'm not too worried in practice is because if things go wrong, it's going to be the Lido users and operators who are going to suffer, right? They're going to get slashed, they're going to get penalized in some way. But one thing I do want to highlight is from the perspective of a user of Lido, there are real risks out there, and maybe risks that you don't completely appreciate. So, there's smart contract bugs potentially. There's the governance risk, which is being mitigated with the staked ETH veto. But what if someone kind of crafted an upgrade with a very subtle backdoor that people don't have the time to properly review, and it still goes through the process? There's also slashing risk, right? That may or may not explain some of the discount that we're seeing on staked ETH. So there are reasons to try and avoid centralization as a user, because that comes with risks.
Just to double click on this, I think the reason why you see stETH trading at a discount to ETH is definitionally because it's not redeemable. So it expresses the time value of money until it becomes properly redeemable. It's almost like a zero coupon bond in some way.
Yeah. That's in addition to all the risks.
So I would say that the slashing risk is in general handled by the curation of the validator set. Personally, we interact with a lot of big parties that hold stETH in size, and I have not heard one person be worried about slashing risk.
The big worry about slashing risk for me, especially in the context of these large operators, is inside jobs. So people think that because there's this separation of the withdrawal key and the staking key, if the withdrawal key is in cold storage and it's never compromised, then funds can't be stolen. That's actually not the case. It turns out that if your hot key is compromised, then you stand to be the victim of a ransom attack. So basically what the attacker does is says, I can prove that I hold your staking key. That means I can slash you whenever I want. If you don't pay me 50% of what you're going to be slashed, I will actually go ahead and slash you. And so the game theory is that you pay the ransom, you withdraw, and then you restake. Minus the bribe that you've paid. And the problem is that it just takes one admin within one of these large operators to be rogue and who has access to these keys, and they can go steal millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars through this attack.
Right. Yeah, and that's something obviously staking providers should secure validation keys as much as staking keys or fund keys, if I might say. You touched, Georgios, a point about the DPEG. We've seen recently
It's not a peg.
Sorry?
It's not a peg.
It's not the peg, right?
There's no peg.
There's no peg. So I mean,
really
the increase, of the difference between stETH, the value of stETH and ETH, and you said one of the main risks is because stETH or ETH are not redeemable, and you cannot burn stETH through the protocol. So what Lido intends to, and it's also a question for you, Vasily, what Lido intends to do in the coming months before withdrawal are enabled to mitigate this risk?
One point I want to add on Justin's things, I think a lot of the concerns highlighted are broader concerns around how validators should operate and not specific to Lido. It can happen to Coinbase, can happen to whoever, as a general point. Okay, how are withdrawals going to work with staked Ether? I mean, from a user perspective, you send your staked Ether somewhere and you get your Ether back plus your interest earned, which is your stETH balance. On a more zoomed-in level, what's going to happen is that right now Lido has its withdrawal credentials set to the withdrawal keys that Justin said, set to a smart contract address. The smart contract is right now a stub. It doesn't do anything, but it's upgradable. So what Lido will eventually need to do is that once withdrawals are properly spec'd, released, like we know how it's going to look like, we're going to upgrade that stub to the proper implementation, and then we will no longer make it upgradable. So you kind of ossify the contract. Now, why this was done is that when Lido was launched, the smart contract withdrawal credentials did not exist. So Lido launched with a multi-sig 6 of 11, if I recall correctly, that currently holds 10% of the Lido funds. And then it switched over to the withdrawal credentials, to the smart contract withdrawal credentials. But the problem is that because we didn't know, we had to make it a proxy. So when we know how the withdrawals will work, which I believe...
You're asking Justin, or?
I don't know. I'm not sure if that's your responsibility, so I don't know if you can comment.
No, I just know that withdrawals are coming, and the way that they're working is very simple. It's actually automated, so you don't have to do anything. So if you have a balance over 32 ETH on a regular basis, the extra balance will be sent to your withdrawal address. If you have a BLS withdrawal address, which is kind of the initial address, then you need to change that to be an ETH1 address, and then withdrawals will be automatically sent to your ETH1 address.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that I'm Lido. I want to trigger the withdrawal of a validator from a smart contract. So originally these were called pull withdrawals, and push, like pull and push, I think was the terminology. And the idea was that the smart contract, you send a message to the smart contract, you burn 32 stETH, or you burn 1 stETH, you burn 1 stETH, it eventually buffers up 32 stETH, it burns 32 stETH, and triggers a withdrawal. And the withdrawal is triggered by sending a message from a smart contract to the validators on the Beacon chain. But I think recently this was changed in some pull request to the specs that I haven't followed closely enough. And now the withdrawals are initiated by the validator's signing key. So there's this open question, I think, right now in the spec around how is the staking layer going to be interacted with from Ethereum L1?
We don't need that, right? Like, we can just leave it there. We don't need to unstake anything from Lido.
Right?
We get more security with that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's...
But we have redemption requests.
And that's a deep question about, I guess, do the validation key or the font keys has the power to unstake. But if we come back to liquid staking and Nico, because we have the representative of another liquid staking pool here, maybe Nico, can you explain what Alluvial is and what Alluvial is bringing to the network additional to Lido, for example?
Yeah, so basically at Alluvial we are building or contributing to liquid staking standards for institutions, and we are working and collaborating with various teams in the ecosystem to achieve that. So for example, we work with Kiln on Ethereum. So the main idea is that currently we have many ETHs that are belonging to institutions and that do not yet have a solution for liquid staking that complies with their requirements, typically requirements for KYC on the investors, also requirements on the quality and the reliability of the validator set. So what we basically are building is a liquid staking solutions where, so similar to Lido, where you can stake and you get a receipt token in exchange of your stake. But we add a layer of KYC control on top of that. So basically, only investors that are known to the protocol can actually deposit and withdraw from the protocol. By doing so, and working in close collaboration with integrators, so mainly custodians over the place who have institutional investors, we aim at providing those people with the solutions that they can use for liquid staking. And so bringing new ETH to the staking market. And yeah, so starting first with Ethereum and then moving to other protocols.
What is Coinbase's or Alluvium's plan for MEV extraction?
So for MEV, we will basically following carefully everything that is happening around PBS. So we definitely expect to participate to PBS. So getting our node operators ready from an infrastructure side, so running MEV-Boost to be able to connect to the builder market.
Are the institutional investors and whatnot, do they have any concerns around MEV extraction?
So I think that's actually, it's still a bit of an open question to me, but like, indeed we will see an ecosystem around MEV that will evolve, where we will have builders that might have like some different types of behaviors, and behaviors that can be judged differently by some people and some other people. So presumably at some point we'll have to set some policies around, okay, am I accepting to validate a block that is coming from this builder? How do we apply that? Maybe this will be at the relayer level, where we will have relayers that you can basically trust better to like work only with builders. So it's still an open question because I think we are still seeing this ecosystem evolving around MEV and PBS. But yeah, maybe hearing from you, Stefan.
Yeah, maybe I'll give some context here, right? So MEV-Boost is built as neutral infrastructure, it's neutral technology. All it does, it allows outsourcing the construction of a block, right? The job of taking transactions, putting them into a block, and then proposing that to the network. It allows for a validator to outsource that to any sort of third party. It doesn't restrict anything about the ordering. It doesn't say anything about the ordering, right? The validators still sort of have the power to say, like, I want this third party to behave in this certain way and order in this certain way because for whatever reason, legal, ethical, compliance reasons, they sort of believe in this. I think we will see a lot more experimentation happening in different types of ordering, different types of transaction types emerge on Ethereum because of it, and you'll have sort of a pretty fundamental change to the way that people think about getting their transactions included on chain in a way that we just cannot predict. So it opens up sort of a blue ocean, like new opportunity space where we'll see a lot of innovation, a lot of transition. And so predicting, from today, like how, what is our MEV policy going to be is sort of an impossible task. I think the decision is more like, okay, here's a neutral solution where you can have experimentation as well as implement these policies in the future as it becomes more clear.
I mean. Yeah, thank you guys. But before coming back to the MEV subject, and thank you, Georgios, you stole one of my questions. But obviously that was very interesting, like how Lido and liquid staking pools in general are handling MEV. Justin, I had a question about, so coming back to the liquid staking pools, right? Do you think, because that was the debate on Twitter, Vitalik and other from the foundations, do you think liquid staking pools should be controlled, or there should be last protection security measures in case liquid staking pools behave badly?
Well, liquid staking pools are controlled, right? Because ultimately they're subject to being slashed if they start misbehaving. I mean, it's possible that Lido if it was like funded at the very beginning and it was kind of part of the social constitution, that it wouldn't grow too large, then I think the things could have changed differently. But given where it is, they had this vote. I think it was kind of a natural outcome for them to not kind of self-constrain themselves. But I think there is still an opportunity out there for a lot more competition, and also some social pressure from the social layer saying, not only do we want competition, but we want the distribution in such a way that we don't cross these very critical in-protocol thresholds like 33%, 50%, 66%.
But again, if the individual validator in a system does not reach that number, it's maybe fine, in the sense that you need multiple validators to collude from the same liquid staking group. Whereas if, like for example, like I'll use you guys because it makes sense. If you have one entity which does not split the stake into multiple non-overlapping entities, the 30% that's in that entity, it's 30%, whereas the 30% in a Lido-style construction is 2% or whatever the max of of the collusion that all the validators do.
Right. So at the end of the day, you want to reduce what's called correlated failures. And there's very different ways to have correlated failures. You can have them just by running the same client, or the stake coming from the same person, or the same operator, or it could be wrapping everything under the same contract, or under the same governance token, like LDO, or whatever it is. Whenever there's correlated failures, you want to try and minimize those and make sure that they go under the protocol thresholds.
Got it. And do you see other centralization risk to the network?
So I guess one centralization risk is of the builders, right? But the good news here is that we have this proposer-builder separation, and the whole reason why we have it is so that if you want to be a validator on Ethereum and get most of the MEV, most of the transaction fees, you don't have to build blocks. The only thing you have to do is basically look at the bids that come in, which are these tiny block headers, and just take the one that pays the most. And there was this conversation previously around maybe the validators can put constraints on what the builders will have to build, maybe for compliance reasons or whatever. I think this might jeopardize the credible neutrality of Ethereum. I think we should try and be as unopinionated and neutral as possible. And the good news here is that there is this research idea which is called MEV smoothing. And here basically it says that every validator must pick the highest paying bid, right? And if they don't, then the attesters won't vote for them. And so that means that there is no discretion anymore for validators. If they're not happy with who's building, then the best they can do is just have no block whatsoever. But then they would forfeit a lot of all the block rewards, but also the MEV.
Cool. George, do you want to answer this question? Do you see any other centralization risk to the network?
I think MEV is the most significant one, and solutions a la MEVBoost are the answer to that. Beyond that, I think anything that has economies of scale typically is a centralization risk. The good thing that now that we're not in that it's not going to be in a proof of work world is that the economy of scale is slightly better, one could argue. So it's slightly better, smaller, I mean. So I feel good about things.
Cool. I think we all do, right? Stefan, we mentioned about MEV, so maximal extractable value used to be minor, now maximal. Can we touch a little bit about MEV? I think you mentioned MEV boost and about PBS as well, so proposer-builder separation.
What do you want to know about it?
Can you first maybe introduce us to what is MEV and what is PBS, right? You mentioned MEV maybe before, but PBS, what is PBS?
Okay, well, I think Justin did a good job talking about PBS and the reason why you want it. It's like a mitigation to keep validators dumb and simple. No offense, it's a difficult job to run validators, but block construction, you don't want validators to specialize on.
We like to be dumb and simple, that's yeah.
So that's really the goal, right? The goal is to say, okay, validators should not try to compete on providing the maximum amount of yield or better yield to their stakers by having some proprietary methods of MEV extraction, because then you can have compounding returns and it leads to down the road having a single entity that controls a large amount of the network. So PBS is just a way to outsource that, like I mentioned, in a neutral way. Yeah, maybe briefly on MEV, I assume a lot of people know already what it is, but maybe a novel way to think about it in a way that is going to be increasingly thought of after the merge is just any sort of cost that the user incurs to be able to achieve some kind of state transition in the chain. So whether that cost is under the form of a priority fee, as is sort of common today on Ethereum, or as a form of exposing some value, maybe through slippage on a trade. This is value that is being paid by the user for inclusion of a state transition on the chain. There's this amazing, flourishing ecosystem of actors that are developing around MEV. There's something called the MEV supply chain that I encourage you guys to take a look at to get a good overview of the different actors in this industry and how they operate on top of transactions.
All right, thank you. And PBS introduced new terms, such as relayers, builders. Can you explain what's the difference?
Yes. So PBS is just the concept of outsourcing block construction. So when it started with Flashbots, we sort of shipped MEVGeth, which allowed to outsource portions of a block in a very trusted way. So the miners retain the ability to take those bundles and put them together into a block. They maintain the ability to see the transactions and ultimately the ability to reorder them. We have this picture of what PBS looks like in the future, which is for validators not to have any access to this, and for builders to be able to permissionlessly send blocks to validators. But we know that this will require some level of consensus changes in protocol. So the question is, what can we build between where we are today on Ethereum that's like a very trusted miner solution to a solution that approximates the results of PBS? And this is where MEV-Boost comes into play. So MEV-Boost is a solution that's architected and developed by Flashbots hand in hand with the community to provide a solution, a PBS-like solution that's ready at the merge with minimum trust assumptions. It introduces these two other parties, mainly builders who construct the blocks, aggregate transactions when a transaction will construct the blocks, and these trusted relayers. So the relayers collect blocks from block builders, they validate them, make sure that they are valid blocks, they escrow them, so they hold on to the block and then only release the header to the validators for signatures. Once they receive a valid block header signature back from the validator, then they release it to the rest of the network. So it's really like a relayer is like a block escrow during the block construction process.
Got it. And will Flashbot will run their own builders?
Yes. So the block building ecosystem is going to be one that like flourishes and is like going to be exponentially bigger, I think, over the course of the next year. But at the start, Flashbots is going to run a builder. We're going to run a relay as well, and relay is planned to be open for other builders to be able to submit blocks to. Yeah.
And how many builders do you intend to see running? Hundreds, thousands, and aren't you afraid that other staking company already running validators or running builders as well?
So I expect something similar to what happened with mining to occur. When we initially launched MEVGeth, some of the miners were like, oh, great, like I can turn this on, and then I can also run a bot operator, like a bot myself. So it's like, okay, I'll do double dipping. I think what they quickly realized is that running a bot themselves isn't really worth the effort, since the auction is designed in such a way that it maximizes their revenues anyways. So the MEV auction as designed by Flashbots is designed to be maximally incentive compatible for node operators, for validators, for miners, not to like have to invest into their own proprietary infrastructure. There's just like no really economic reason to make that that investment. How many builders will there be? I think it will start with few, then there will be many, and then there will probably be fewer. So there's going to be this curve, right, where you have this completely new industry. Like there's a ton of opportunity for innovation. It'll be super dynamic. We'll see a lot of competition. Eventually, the market will sort of consolidate, and there'll be fewer players. I think the big question there is how many in like the terminal case will there be, and does this provide some kind of risk for centralization? Is it going to be one? Is it going to be 10? Is it going to be 100? And that's difficult to model at this point.
And also, even if there's like 10 builders that are plugged on relayers that submit the blocks in the end, the 10 builders might be composed of 10 other builders each. And so you can almost see like a tree structure of like builders that build together like collectively blocks. Yeah, kind of, I guess. So I don't think it's that big of a risk that the terminal state might have maybe fewer builders. I think what's more important is that there is no validator that tries to achieve economies of scale by extracting MEV themselves. And miners at least found out that trying to extract MEV themselves can bite them back, especially when, I forget which miner got Salmonella attacked.
Ethermine.
Yeah, and then they stopped doing sandwiches.
They adopted Flashbots very quickly after that event,
yeah.
I will say.
So you're quickly met with reality when you're playing on-chain PvP. So tread carefully.
Got it. Justin, how do you see the differentiation between builders and validators? And how do you support as well Flashbots initiative to work on that?
Yeah, I think the separation is critical, and actually it's very natural in a maturing ecosystem to have like specialization of roles. I am expecting quite a bit of centralization in the builders, but the good news is that even if there's one builder and they control all the blocks, you still can't do censorship. And the reason is that we have this censorship resistance mechanism where basically the validators who may be running on Raspberry Pis and not being very powerful, they can detect that some small subset of transactions are being censored, and they can like force inclusion on chain, even if they're not included in the primary blocks that are built by the builders.
Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, then I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenge of this completion of the chain moving from proof of work to proof of stake. So maybe Justin, could you remind me what are the withdrawal states today? What will be the withdrawal state after the merge, and obviously when withdrawal will be enabled? Just to give them a quick summary or introduction of about the state of withdrawals.
So if you are a validator right now, you can't withdraw. What you can do is you can exit, meaning that you stop your validator duties and you stop accruing penalties and rewards, but then the ETH is just sitting there on the beacon chain. After the merge, there's no change to this. And then sometime in the future, I don't know exactly when, there will be withdrawals which will be enabled. And as I mentioned, is this automatic process where if you have any balance over 32 ETH and you're active, then that extra balance will be sent to your ETH1 address. And if you're not active, if you've so-called exited, then your full balance will be sent to your ETH1 address. Now, yeah, George just brought up this interesting question, which is, can we have withdrawals that are not only triggerable by the staking keys, but also by the withdrawal keys? So if you want to withdraw, if you control the staking key, it's easy. You just exit, and then you'll be withdrawn automatically. And I think if you want to have like these really high-grade, trustless staking pools, then you do want the smart contract to be able to force the withdrawal. And so that's something that I guess the research team is supportive of.
I mean, that's a very good transition. How do staking pools are getting ready for withdrawals? Is there any updates to do or anything to monitor?
So for us, it's #1 priority we're working on, like the exact withdrawals algorithm. It's not a trivial thing to do because the nature of it is like, if there is no slashing, it's pretty simple. You put in staked ETH and it's getting frozen, and like the withdrawals go into queue and you get your Ether when it comes out. But in staked ETH, like what is it's fungible, so all the penalties are also socialized, including slashings, which can be long and pretty significant in size potentially, and that means that like in this period between where you locked your staked ETH and you want to withdraw, there could be a slashing, and the result of a slashing is not determined until some point in time that is 3 weeks away from the slashing or so. So it's quite complex interlocking of different asynchronous and pretty long processes. We are almost done with design. I think it's going to implement it in the next few months, and then we'll test it, deploy it, and we'll be ready by the time withdrawals are made, implemented in the protocol. With the current design, the lack of forced withdrawals is not forced exits, withdraw credential forced exits, is not really important because our operator set is curated. If withdrawals are needed, the withdrawals will happen by node operators message on beacon chain. But it's very important to enable the permissionless side of operations that does not require a huge bond to operate. So a lot of interlocked game theory and technical challenges here.
Got it. Nico, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, so we are actively pending like the finalization of the specifications to be ready to implement what we need. Indeed, there will be some challenges, I guess, and like in the details. I presume, like even when you say like you will be like the funds will be pushed from like rewards will be pushed from consensus layer to execution layer. Like when will actually this happen? Because if you do it every block, that might be very. So like having all those details will be important for us, so we can like implement what we need to collect rewards from the consensus layer. And yeah, I agree also with Vasily that there are complexities with that, because like will we be able to identify from which validator we are getting the rewards coming to the execution layer? So like those type of questions that will have to be taken care of carefully when the specifications are finalized.
Yeah, I mean, you know, before we kind of give you an open question and then ask question to the audience, there was something I really wanted to do. But before asking this question to you, Justin, it's like, when do you think the merge is going to happen? Right? Who's going to think, or who's thinking this is going to happen in August? August? Nobody? ETH Berlin, right? So August, right? End of August. September, sorry. So yeah, September. October. Next year. Okay, so the $1 billion question, Justin. When do you think the merge is going to happen?
The honest answer is I don't know, and every time I made a prediction, it was wrong.
Yeah, we've heard like August in Miami, I think, right? Permissionless.
Yeah, I said like it was very likely by September, and August was also likely. I think August is not going to happen now.
What doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Literally doesn't matter. Of course. We have August, September, October, the same day.
The real merge is friends we made along the way, so.
I mean, it's my birthday in September, so I would prefer.
Safely, and any notion of pressure is just wrong and not the approach that we should have as individual systems.
Right, for sure. So opening questions is, after the merge, after the withdrawal are enabled, what do you think are the challenges of the network as a whole? Justin, maybe starting with you, and I would like to have the view with all of you guys. What are the challenges of the network?
Okay, so I guess my role, working on a consensus, is to make sure that Ethereum is as secure as possible. And the motto that we have is we want Ethereum to be World War III grade. We want it to survive World War III. And so there's a number of updates that we want, security upgrades that will harden Ethereum. And one of the low-hanging attacks that is possible after the merge, is a denial of service attack on the block proposers. And the reason is that right now on the beacon chain, and it will hold post-merge, you will know who the next proposers will be. You'll know their public key. And so you can figure out their IP address by looking at the gossip network, and then you can go DDoS them. And this is particularly damaging for home validators who might not have a very fancy networking infrastructure to prevent these denial of service vectors. And so one of the upgrades that we're looking to push is so-called secret leader election, where as a proposer, you know when you need to propose next, but no one else observing the blockchain knows that you will be the one. Only after you've made your block, you've revealed, ta-da, I'm the proposer, but that's too late. Now that you produce your block, you can't be DDoSed.
Got it. Vasily, what do you think are the challenges of Ethereum in the long run, and how do you intend to, improve them or work on them?
I think that Ethereum has chosen one of the likeliest way to be the most relevant blockchain network, and it's to focus on data availability and let execution environments flourish in unrestricted ways. and it's very likely to be the right choice because like the diversity fosters the innovation that is like faster than anywhere else. Like permissionless deployment of DApps and smart contracts in Ethereum did lead to to explosion of protocols and stuff. But I think it's going to lead to like a huge fragmentation of user base and the capital because there are no robust bridges between the execution environments and the wallets are all over the place on this and etc., which is going to be like a very significant roadblock here in this roadmap. I don't have any particular like on the consensus layer, the main execution environment layer. I think the only thing that concerns me is block builder centralization. That's going to be a challenge, which I don't know how it's going to get solved yet. But the real threat is, and I think is like not the threat, but like the real challenge is the business model mostly than on consensus layer, on tech layer.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Do you have any view on the challenges and how do you intend to work on them?
How many years in the future do you want to?
I mean, you can do, I don't know, like, do you have times or like you can do 5 years, right? Like,
okay, I'm gonna say MEV things because that's the stuff that I look at. I think there might not be Ethereum specific, but there are like trends in MEV that we will see happening that will address things like block builder centralization, that will address things like having multiple different execution domains. I think we will see PBS and like block or MEV boost abstraction propagate to a lot of other execution layers and chains as well. That's trend number one. I think trend number two is we'll see a lot more innovation at the transaction artifact layer. So this concept that we've had since like the birth of Ethereum of what an Ethereum transaction is going to get very, very fuzzy over the next couple of years. That will create like a really exciting new path for innovation that I think will have pretty significant impact on the base layers as well. So those are the trends that I'm excited about.
super exciting. Georges, you want to say anything?
At the highest level, I think the categories that are the most important are consensus security, layer 2 scaling, making the execution environment better, literally the EVM, and then MEV related topics. So on consensus security, the most important topic which has not been broadly discussed is a set of papers released by Joachim Neu, like Stanford PhD, now co-worker of ours, who describes a lot of consensus attacks on the LMD Ghost protocol. Some are patched. Right now we have a secure protocol without a formal proof, so we don't know if there are more attacks to be done that are similar to that. I think it's going to be critical to either figure out some modification to LMD Ghost so that it becomes secure, or ramp up the efforts towards Vitalik's and I don't know who else is building it, single slot finality proposals. So that's on consensus security. On layer 2 scaling, I think EIP 4844 is the most important thing in the short to medium term. In the long term, the full dunk sharding proposal, because Ethereum has taken this direction of being a settlement layer where you just post data and fraud proofs or validity proofs, and you need the data capacity to go up. And I'm a very hands-on person, so the full dunk sharding proposal, I have no idea how it will be implemented and deployed, etc. But the 4844 proposal, like their proof of concept, testnets, etc., I can see a very clear path for it. So I'd love to see that happen. On the execution, I think the most exciting things for me are improvements on the EVM, literally creating parallel EVMs. So contrary to popular belief, people say, you know, Solana can do parallel EVM, Ethereum cannot do it. No, standard parallelization techniques apply, and you can do parallel EVMs. Want to see a just-in-time EVM, which basically instead of running EVM bytecode, it at runtime transpiles it to native assembly and have 50 to 100x, if not more, speed improvements. this has downstream implications for syncing times, for how fast builders can simulate blocks and find the most profitable block, how fast you can do simulations for security. It has like a ton of, basically every improvement in performance of the EVM improves both security and the MEV extraction environment. And what was the fourth one? I forgot the fourth category. We can keep it here.
Very interesting. I didn't.
Yeah. So on MEV, I'm excited about techniques. One, basically the two-step execution, where you submit all transactions encrypted, and then all the validators collaboratively decrypt the transactions. This is being deployed on Cosmos chains right now, and I think it's a technique that will find its way everywhere. And in general, the whole MEV boost to full protocol baked in PBS, I'm very excited about. But again, the same way that I feel like proto-dunk sharding or EIP 4844 is more likely to happen in the short term and then kind of like stick around compared to the full dunk sharding, the same way that back in the day, like we gave up on the whole plasma train of thought and went, okay, rollups, like screw it, like we cannot do it, like we cannot solve the data availability problem, so just give up. I think the same thing is going to happen probably, or might happen with MEV boost compared to PBS and EIP 4844 with full dunk sharding.
Spicy.
Sorry?
Spicy.
Yeah. But I mean, I believe the code, not the, yeah.
Nico, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, but so I'm less of a researcher, so I will not be able to share that many detail and see this long in the future. But I think what is happening with the merge is like one of the most amazing software technological events that we could even imagine. Like coordinating so many teams. We've been speaking like core developers, node operators, pools, and all the ecosystem looking around that. So I think like once Ethereum goes through that, for sure it will like bring all the lights on Ethereum, like being this hopefully best layer one solutions that we can use for our future. And with the withdrawals that will come later, like we will get finally in the situation where Ethereum can like work as expected with proof of stake, and like so creating the usage and the dynamics that are the ones that we expect to see living in the long term. So just like this is such a great moment to go through, and like very happy to be part of it. And thank you, Justin, and the research guys that make that possible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's very, very, very exciting. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Do you please have some questions for these gentlemen? One question there.
Yeah, I do have a question. Speaking of centralization vectors, one thing that I think wasn't mentioned is white label setups. So what do you think of that as, for example, as a staking pool? How do you ensure that they don't like pose centralization threat for like the protocol? And for the base layer, what does it mean? So how do you perceive these like centralization threat?
So the white labeling, you mean like tracking validators?
White labeling, I mean running outsourcing running a validator to some like service or some solution, but I still do own the key. So yeah, but the setup is predefined.
Yeah, I think that's like the one problem that if it can be solved, we can solve decentralization, the staking layer. And if we can't solve it, we can't solve decentralization on staking layer. Staking is not quite like mining, like doesn't have this same exact economy of scale as mining does, but it does have some measure of it. Like the expenses on validation are mostly flat. It doesn't really make a difference how many validators you run, like 100, 10,000, or like 10,000. It's almost the same cost. They are mostly in labor costs, and the stakers who will not want to stake themselves. Mostly they want to delegate because staking is like, it's not exactly hard on Ethereum, but it's hardish, and like you need to be awake for the merge, for example, right? It's not like what everyone wants, and you can't really go on vacation, etc. So like delegators people will delegate the stake one way or another using like the legal contracts, the liquid staking derivatives, the protocols that will emerge for delegations, and they will require the highest APR, and the highest APR requires economy of scale, and you basically end up with like people white labeling validation. It is happening to an extent, like, and to a large extent right now. I think if you, my estimation that like the largest node operator on Ethereum runs between 10 and 15% of stake right now, and nobody's know that because like can't really know that because it's it doesn't have even like a delegation list like Cosmos does or something. So like that's the white whale of liquid staking, killing the white labeling, so that you can have a diverse validator set.
Is there a way to get more transparency around that? Or is that just like a impossible task?
You cannot do delegation in ETH2 POS as it is right now, because the moment that you do it and you have uneven validator stakes, the sampling breaks because it needs to be stake weighted, and so you're not able, like the protocol no longer is secured by that, and so you need to figure out a way to modify the algorithm to not have sampling, the consensus algorithm to not have sampling, and that gets into the single slot finality research direction, which is like unspecified.
Yeah, and I guess one side of the question is like, even with pure proof of stake, is there a way to have more transparency? Who's running what, and what's the percentage of?
Only if you know, like if Kraken outsources whatever. I think like it was the case that Kraken was, some of Kraken's validators were being run by Chorus, no? Right, okay, yeah. So, yeah, but like they need to commit to being transparent. So you have to kind of like unionize and ask them, you know, please show how much you're, but like nobody can force you to do that, right? So.
Yeah, the only thing I can tell is that we don't run 15% of the network, in ours.
I mean, good for your business.
Sorry?
Good for your business if you did.
I'd say that two like actors on Ethereum that make that like its most transparency to it is probably like all nodes folks and Lido folks. Sorry about like bragging about that, but like the all nodes put graffiti on each validator they run, as far as I know, and yeah, and it's really interesting to see like they run like a lot of rocket pool folks, for example, rocket pool operators, as a like it's not exactly white label because they label it by themselves, but like they still run it. And Lido is super transparent about operators, and like we have whitelist not because it's like we want to have it, but because we actually can ensure that they're like operators that are in Lido are to like we have a reasonably reasonable like we have reasons to believe they're not white label. Like we talk to them, examine the setup. You remember the onboarding round, right?
Very well.
Yeah. Greeting you like for hours straight on that way.
It was my first Zoom with Vasily, and then love story since 2 years now. Is there any other questions? One over there. I've seen you in the back, so no worries. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm just curious how it will affect smart contract developers and dApp builders, because Justin, you said that just a few opcodes will be changed in the future, but is there some EIPs or consideration to change, I don't know, Brad, the block? What, sorry?
The block hash opcode becomes insecure for randomness.
Okay, so
like before it costs, manipulate block hash, after it doesn't.
Okay.
the randomness of code is a different way to get randomness, but if you are chain link and you use block hash, I think somewhere chain link uses block for the VRF, maybe I forget, but somewhere there's a block hash call. Sorry. Anywhere you use block hash, a validator can trivially add junk bytes to the block and re-sign it until they find a block hash that is whatever value. So any on-chain lottery that you have seen will break. And this is this might be MEV alpha leak. I don't know. Like I think people are going to be doing this at scale. So yeah, any on-chain lottery that uses block hash breaks immediately.
Okay. And outside of block hash, is there a plan? I don't know, just to touch the block size or. Yeah. Okay. I think you answered the question.
I mean, the other tiny difference is that the average block time will change. So right now it's around 13 seconds, and so if you make assumptions around that, using the block height as a clock, then things will not work the same. And I think there's potentially some DeFi pools that will give you, right.
Okay, so it will have an impact on that. Okay.
I think there is also an edge case for some people, but like block times will become much more predictable. So applications that depend on predictable block times. So like I assume unpredictable block times will maybe become a bit worse in practice. And there will be, I think, more missed blocks. Not really missed, but like there will be empty slots. So some blocks will be within 12 seconds interval, some blocks will be 24 seconds interval. So that's an unusual thing to happen on proof of work. So, but will be a usual thing to happen on a proof of stake.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about. So first of all, thanks you, Kiln, for hosting this super cool event, and glad to be here. I have a question about like user experience and finality after the merge. So I think basically right now, right in proof of work, when I send a transaction, I wait like 6 confirmations and it's accepted. Now, as I understand, in Ethereum 2, there are slots and right there are epochs and these checkpoints until something is finalized. How will this impact users after the merge that like sign transactions and participate in DeFi or something?
So basically, I guess exchanges, when you make a deposit, they will only credit your ETH or whatever, ERC20 tokens after some amount of time. I mean, what I've experienced personally is 20 blocks of delay. And kind of ironically, the finality gadget might slow this down. And the reason is that, it takes at least 2 epochs, which is 64 slots as opposed to just 20 slots. Yeah, I mean, as Georgios mentioned, we're working to accelerate finality. And in the ideal case, we can get it down to a single slot, just 12 seconds. And here there would be a significant improvement for users. I guess one thing that I'll mention is that with attestations, you basically have parallel confirmations coming in immediately, even with just a single block. So if you observe the chain and you see that all the attesters are attesting to a block, then this block is not economically finalized in the sense that you don't have an economic guarantee that if it gets reverted, then validators will get slashed, but you do have this kind of empirical de facto kind of strong soft guarantee that it won't get reverted.
Okay, but let's say in practice, if I have 2 transactions, let's say approval of ERC20 and then spend. Do I have to wait the full 2? No, I can just go on.
You can do all of this in one single block, or even one single transaction.
For the most part, it doesn't change much. K blocks deep in proof of work, K blocks deep in proof of stake for whatever K you want to pick as a security parameter, depending on the use case. 6 blocks also is just for Bitcoin hash rate. It's a meme. What you could do to pick a smaller K parameter is we wrote a blog post earlier in the year with Vitalik about the reorganizations after the merge. And basically, you pick large K because you can expect that there might be a reorg and you don't want to accept a reorged transaction. But turns out if you do the math also because of what Justin said, that attestators vote on many things at the same time, and also because of the sampling that happens in proof of stake, an adversary cannot concentrate all their stake in continuous slots because your stake gets spread over the epoch. It means that you cannot reliably control multiple slots and do many, cause reorgs to happen, which means that maybe you can afford to have a smaller K parameter. So, if in proof of work the K parameter was 20, the proof of stake transition makes it 18 for whatever reason, then if you also take this into account, maybe you can say 12 blocks. So you can think of it as an on-the-margin optimization. But for the most part, order of magnitude things do not change. And finality comes 2 epochs later, which is 12 minutes later, which is an eternity. So I treat finality as just as a protocol baked-in thing to prevent some crazy attack that you do not expect with keys from the past and whatnot. But beyond that, it doesn't really do anything, in the strict sense of the reorgs context.
Very interesting. Yeah, there was a question in the back. Luca.
I wanted to have your opinion on how zero-knowledge proof could impact Ethereum, maybe to solve some of the issues you've raised before, Justin and Georgios. And Stefan, this last one is for you. How it can be used in MEV Boost to achieve some kind of fraud-proof communication between the proposer and the relayer, for example.
I have a couple of thoughts. Or you want to take that for the MEV Boost?
I don't want to take that one. You know more than me, Luca.
You can. So in the MEV Boost context, it's important that the validator doesn't know what the block is, and you rely on the trusted relayer to escrow the block. And so what you could do is never have the validator receive a decrypted block, always give them an encrypted block, and they have some form of black box that can do encrypted computation, whether that's fully homomorphic encryption, whether that's SGX, whether that's multi-party computation. And the zero-knowledge proof part comes in by adding a snark as to make these protocols more efficient. Matter of fact, Justin and I, we were in a talk yesterday where we discussed that, so we'll share the link. So that's one area. The other area where you can use zero-knowledge proofs is in the data availability protocols, in particular in the, do you call it the ZKP? Not exactly, in the polynomial commitment used in the data availability.
No, I mean, one place where we do use it is in the secret leader election. Okay. So we want to have a proof of permutation, and we don't want it to leak kind of the private secret that's used in the permutation. I guess another place where you could use zero knowledge in the context of MEV is when you make an encrypted transaction, you don't want to leak the metadata. For example, the sender address or the gas use. And so you can have a zero knowledge proof that you have enough balance to pay for the gas without having to leak the sender address, for example.
Any other questions? Oh, Alan.
What do you think?
Take the mic. Yeah.
When do you think PBS specs will kind of be finalized, and will they require any soft fork, hard fork in the future?
Right. So there's two flavors of PBS, right? There's what Flashbots is working. So there's MEV Boost, non-enshrined PBS, and I guess the specs are fairly close to finalized, or even finalized. As for enshrined PBS, that's still in the research phase. But I guess late stage research where it's just a matter of writing the specs.
Just.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about the MEV Boost side of it. So MEV Boost is ready, it's coded, it's in testing right now. So all the node operators, please, set up MEV Boost, run it in your infrastructure. This is the limiting factor for the merge. In terms of enshrined PBS, there's just so many other things to figure out. I guess depending on who you ask in this panel, it might never come, according to Georgios. But yeah, it's still a heavy research topic. So we're not close to a spec there.
And also feedback loops matter. The moment one thing is in production, and you have a tight feedback loop, you make it a lot better than doing the research phase. So in a way, MEV-Boost is like an early version of the full PBS, but maybe it gets good enough.
If I can, do you guys decide yet on which address will be the fee address, or both approach will be adopted, one approach?
Yeah, so context for everyone else. So as part of the move to proof of stake, right, what's traditionally been considered the Coinbase address is like sort of referred to as the fee recipient address. And validators can set any address that they want when they produce a block locally. In the context of MEV-Boost and outsourcing the block construction, you don't really want validators to set the fee recipient address at the time of proposing. You want them to define it ahead of time so that block builders can have deterministic block construction given this fee recipient address. So the way that it works is that node operators or validators announce to the block builder network the fee recipient address that they want to use. And the block builders can do one of two things. Either they set this fee recipient address as the address in the block header, and it accrues the fees directly, or they set their own fee recipient address in the header, and then include a transaction within the block that transfers value from their address to the fee recipient specified by the validator. So both of those approaches are supported within MEV-Boost.
Any other questions? Okay, so, there's one, Pranith?
Thank you. Just curious about the timelines around SSLE and whether that's been spec'd and maybe being experimented on. So.
Yeah, so we have specs for SSLE, and it turns out that most of the complexity is cryptographic. So as I mentioned, we have to actually have this zero-knowledge proof. The good news, I guess, is that it's a zero-knowledge proof for very structured and specific statements, which is this permutation argument. And Mary Maller designed a zero-knowledge proof for us, and she wrote an implementation. I guess we're in the process of making it more production-grade, so kind of hardening the security proofs, making things more modular, and also writing implementations that are much more performant than the proof of concepts. And then the next step after that will be to have a full integration with one of the clients and have some sort of DevNet for that and try it out in practice. So yeah, there's still quite a bit of work to see a secret leader election in production, but if we do see attacks post-merge, then this is something that will be prioritized. And so I guess this acts as a deterrent to anyone here who might want to extract some MEV by DDoSing validators. Please don't do that.
Anecdotally, in proof-of-stake networks, the DDoS attacks on validators have not been a thing. Even in networks where like not just the proposer is known and you need to like kind of find out where he lives. In Polkadot, you have to publish your IP like directly with no no sentries. Like you expose your validator with IP, and DDoS had been seen, I think. Of course, it's not as developed as Ethereum. Like MEV is much less PvP there, and or maybe like sometimes not a thing. But like that didn't happen in Avalanche, where the schedule is known as well. It didn't happen on Polkadot, where schedule is known and IP is known. It didn't happen in Cosmos, where schedule is known. So, like
depends on how many people are looking.
Yeah, sure. Like it's not an indication of like future performance, but
Ethereum has a lot more adversaries.
Absolutely,
than
yeah.
all the rest combined by an order of magnitude.
Yeah. But these networks are also valuable. You can still short them, and the attack is economically viable, potential at least, and it does not happen. So.
Thank you for these answers. Last question, maybe? Okay, so without further ado, please give a huge round of applause to this gentleman.